Hey guys, it's Robin May, and I'm excited to have a chance to come and chat with you guys. I've been wanting to have this discussion for a while, but I'm getting to do it right now, and I'm excited. What I want you to do is to comment in the comment section even after this video is done, because I'm going to stay engaged. I'm going to keep coming back to the video just to hear your thoughts, to give you some insight that may help you, and just to support you, because I really am serious about this conversation. For those of you who don't know, I am a licensed therapist and a certified life coach. And what that means is that I've committed my life to helping people sort through their life stuff. And we all have life stuff. The title of the Facebook Live is life catching up with you? And then I want to share with you 3 questions if that's the case. If life is catching up with you, there are 3 questions that you can ask yourself that may help. Now, let me give this caveat really quick. I am over 40. And so I don't know how these people do these Facebook Lives without having some notes, but I got to have some notes. So forgive me, okay? But let me start out by sharing with you guys a quick story. When I was a little girl, I think I was around 3 or 4, which makes sense when I look at my 3-year-old right now. But I think I was about 3 or 4. And my family tells the story that we were all sitting in my childhood home in the living room. Now, my family still lives in the same home that I grew up in. And so we were sitting in the living room. Now, let me describe what the living room was like. When you walk into the house, there's a living room to the left. There are 2 sets of double doors, one right in front of the front door and one on the opposite side of the living room. And so both of those double doors were wide open. One leads to the den and the rest of the house, and the other set of double doors lead to the kitchen. You got that in your mind? You picturing that? All right. So we're all sitting around the house. Sitting in the living room, and we're just chatting. We're just talking, just doing family Sunday, hanging out. Well, my mom says that all of a sudden I get up, I go to the set of double doors that's near the kitchen, and I just close those doors and come back and sit down. Well, I was always a little advanced as a child, and so they thought I was just trying to be grown. So my mom said, Robin, go open those doors. Nobody told you to close those double doors. And I said, okay, if you want the fire to get us. My mom said, what? Girl, I said go open those doors. I'm cooking. I need to know what's going on in the kitchen. I said it again. Okay, if you want the fire to get us. So at this point, my mom is like, what is she talking about? She gets up, she goes to the kitchen, and the entire stove is on fire. Fire trucks have to come to the house on fire. I was telling the truth. There was literally a fire in the kitchen. But my little 3 or 4-year-old brain thought that all I had to do was close the doors to protect myself and my family from the fire. Well, as I continued to mature, I started to see a pattern in my life. As I look back through high school and I look back through college, and if I'm honest, a lot of my early adulthood, I saw that same pattern continuing. There would be fires, it'd be big things happening in my life. And I would think, let me just close the door. Let me just ignore that. Let me act like that's not happening and go on with my life. But as I know now, and as I'm sure you know, fires eventually catch up with you. My question to you is life catching up with you? My sister and I often use this saying, and I say it to my clients all the time. We'll say, girl, that's too much. I got to put it on the shelf. That's too much for me to deal with. I'm just going to put it on the shelf. But if you imagine, I just told y'all I was over 40. If you're 25, if you're 35, 55, after a while, that shelf is full. It can't fit anything else on it. If you put one more thing on it, it's all going to tumble over. Eventually, the fires catch up to you. Eventually, life catches up to you. And when it catches up to you, it can show up in different ways. It can show up as debilitating depression. It can show up as crippling anxiety. It can show up as subtle self-sabotage. And the reason why I say subtle self-sabotage, it could show up with how you treat your body. It can show up how you engage in relationships. It can show up in so many ways because we have learned for so long how to push it to the side. We stuff. We've never been taught how to process. So we stuff and we fake the funk. We even start believing in what I call the smoke and mirrors of social media. We really begin to think that everybody's life has it going on but mine. Hey, Miss Brenda, I'm so glad to see you, because this really will resonate with you. I know it resonates with me, this particular part. Those of us who are church folk, raising my hand, those of us who are believers, we sometimes have it worse, because you can't dare be a believer and actually be depressed. How dare you be a believer, a follower of Jesus, and things not be perfect? That's one of the biggest myths of the church. And if the church doesn't begin to shift that mindset, we're going to continue to have people who are living lives that are not congruent with what we say we really believe. The body of Christ has got to learn to deal with the tough stuff and not just put the pray about it bandage on things and think that that's all you have to do. Don't get me wrong. I will lay prostrate in my house. I will plead the blood of Jesus over myself, over my husband, over my children, over our situation. I will do it. But then you got to get up and do something. All right, I got distracted with that. Okay, but if this is you, if you have ever felt like, yeah, Robin, life is catching up with me. You know what? The fire has caught up with me. I can't put nothing else on my shelf because it's catching up with me. If this is you, there are 3 questions that I want you to ask yourself, because I think it can change the patterns of your life. I don't want you to be confused. I'm not telling you that these 3 questions are going to change your life, but it can start you on the right path to having the life you really want. Okay? All right. Now, as you're coming on, make sure you're sharing the video, asking people to join us. And remember, even after this video, I'm going to be engaging with you, because I really think this is the time. We need to have this conversation right now. Okay? So here are the 3 questions. If life has started to catch up with you, if you're saying, yes, Robin, it's just too much. It's starting I'm starting to see it show up in how I engage with my children. It's showing up in how I engage with my husband. It's showing up with how I engage with my wife. I'm even seeing it when I am interacting with my peers. If that's the case, I'm going to give you 3 questions to ask yourself, okay? Here's question number 1. What are you doing intentionally to self-care? What are you doing intentionally to self-care? Here is your key takeaway. With each of these questions, I'm going to give you a key takeaway, and here it is. No one is more responsible for you than you. Shall I give it to you again? No one is more responsible for you than you. Not your mama, not your sister, not your man. No one is more responsible for you than you. You have got to learn how to discern when your cup is running low. Did y'all hear that? Now, y'all, that's a tweetable. Y'all can go ahead and tweet that, but I'm not going to give you these tweetable statements and not give you some how-tos. But let me give you that one again. You have got to learn how to discern when your cup is running low. Listen, I can't tell you, Brenda. I can't tell you, Travarius. I can't tell anybody else on this Facebook Live when your cup is running low. You have to discern when your own cup is running low. All right. But let me tell you, how do you do this? Okay. I'm going to give you a strategy for exactly how you do it. This is what I do. This is what I coach my clients through. I even have a workbook and an audio, and I'll put it in the comment section that you can walk through it yourself. Through the audio and the workbook, I teach you how to walk through it. But this is how you do it. If you are recognizing, look, I need to know how to self-care. You need to be able to discern when your cup is running low. Let me teach you how to do it. Okay. Number 1, you have got to identify what you value. Our life is governed by what we value, whether we know it or not. Your life is governed by what you value. So you have to identify what it is you truly value. And if your values are not aligned with your core beliefs, then you need to shift your values. Oh, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm not going to get stuck there. But I want you to identify your values. That's step number 1. Step number 2, then you have to ask yourself, how do I intentionally honor my values? So you're going to identify your values. Number 2, you're going to figure out, how do I intentionally honor my values? Here's the big one. You measure your life satisfaction according to your values. So once you've identified your values, you've identified how do I intentionally honor my values, then you can look at your life satisfaction and you can determine if your life satisfaction is out of sync based on your values. So let me break it down to you how I do it. Okay, so there are four values for me. 4 core values. Let me tell you what they are. Number 1, my relationship with the Lord. Who I am as a woman of faith is not a category in my life. It is my life. So everything comes from that. So it's not just my faith, my family, my friends. It's not that. It's my faith. And everything comes from that. So that's a core value. Next, my family. Like all of my family is important to me. But right now I want to just talk about my husband and those 3 girls. That's a core value. My friendship, a core value. And then lastly, walking in destiny and purpose. Now stay with me because I'm going to walk you through how to do this. So I said my faith, my family, my husband, and my 3 children primarily right now is what I'm talking about. My friends and walking in destiny and purpose. So for me, those things are what I value. I know how I intentionally live my life to honor those values. I can tell when my mood is coming down, when I am irritable, when I am not feeling so good, when I don't feel really happy, when I feel really anxious, when I feel unsettled, I can stop, look at those values and see what I've been neglecting. I can tell my life satisfaction is directly impacted when I'm not honoring what I say I value. So what I'll do when I'm kind of in a mood, I'll stop and say, wait a minute, what's off? Wait a minute, Robin, you haven't had any time with God. You haven't set aside some time just to pray and seek God. And so that part of your cup has run low. Or I might be able to say, wait a minute, I haven't had any time with my girlfriends. Let me call somebody. Let's just go get some appetizers. Let me be really transparent. Last year, I worked a lot of hours. I increased my hours dramatically. Well, because of that, I wasn't as hands-on with my children as I need to be. And so I would find myself being very snappy and very irritable. And I realized it's because I didn't even know what was going on with their homework. I didn't know how Reagan was doing in gymnastics. I wasn't sure what exactly was going on with Ryan. Riley was running the whole house crazy. But it's because I wasn't honoring what I say my core values are. So that's how I do it. I want you to do it. Don't just look at this Facebook Live. I want you to stop today and list out what are your core values. If you need me to help you, I'll help you. I'll put the link for the workbook that can walk you through it. But if you want to figure out how do I keep life from taking over? How do I make sure that I am self-caring? You have to identify what your values are. How are you honoring your values? And how your life satisfaction is connected to those values, okay? So question number 1, how do you intentionally self-care? All right. If life is catching up with you, here is the second one. Question number 2. Now I want you to lean in with me. Who have you given uninhibited access to your life? Here's your key takeaway. Y'all know you've heard me say this before. We were never meant to do life alone. We were never meant to do life alone. So who in your life has uninhibited access to your life? Who is it in your life who can see past and is willing to push past the guard you have up? You know you have a guard up. We all have guards up. You know, when somebody asks us, how are we? Oh, I'm good. Who can see past that and is willing to push past that? Who in your life have you given permission to have access to you to hold you accountable? Now, let me be clear about that because this is where it gets dangerous. Some of you guys are disappointed in the frailties of people because you've put a person on a pedestal. Not one person can be your everything, not even your husband, not even your wife. One person cannot be your everything. That's something that the romance novels told us. My husband cannot be my everything. That's too much pressure for that man to handle. I got a lot going on. And so he can't be my everything. He's a critical piece of the puzzle in my life, but it's too much pressure for me to put everything on him. And so some of you are disappointed in relationships, and you've decided that you got to do life by yourself because you've put somebody on a pedestal. You've put too much pressure on one person, and that person disappointed you, because people will disappoint you. Okay? So again, who have you given uninhibited access to your life? Who has the permission and the ability to see past and to push past your guards? That's the question I want to ask you. All right. I want to tell you, remember, I'm going to teach you how to do each of these things. If you want to create that type of circle, if you want to create a circle of people in your life, now this circle doesn't need to be and should not be 20 people. 20 people shouldn't have that kind of access to your life. You got to be now 20 people might think they have that kind of access to your life, but everybody should not have that kind of access to your life. So when I'm talking about creating this circle, I'm talking about 2 or 3 people. If you're blessed, you might have 5 or 6 people, but you got to be very careful about how you create that circle, okay? Because your circle could be the detriment to your progression. I had to pause there. Can I give it to you one more time? Your circle could be the detriment to your progression. Check your circle. All right. So how do you do this? How do you create a circle that's going to help you when life is catching up to you? One of my good girlfriends, she and her sorority sisters had to be intentional about this circle. They lost one of their sorority sisters that looked like she had everything going on. They had no idea that she was depressed, and they were shocked when she took her own life. And because of that, my girlfriend and her line sisters created a system where they checked in with each other once a month, and they made sure that they were asking the right questions to figure out what was really going on. You have to have intentional conversations with your circle. You need to communicate to your circle, listen, this is how we hold one another accountable. This is what we do. Let's all agree that we're going to commit to being this community, the safe space for one another. One of my girlfriends is going through a particularly challenging time right now, and so I know how important it is to give people space when they're going through a time. You don't need to suffocate people. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But at the same time, you got to know when the time has been too long. So my girlfriend is going through a tough time, and I hadn't talked to her in about 3 days. And after that 3rd day, I texted her and said, hey, boo, I haven't talked to you in a while, but I just want to let you know if I don't hear from you in 24 hours, I'm coming to your house. Because I'd already had permission to see past and push past her guard. And so I texted her and said, hey, you got 24 hours, boo, love you. You're going to have to be irritated with me. I'm coming to your house. She responded and said, Robin, I'm good. You don't have to come over. Now, I still went over. I just didn't knock on the door. I just left her a care package. But because she responded, I knew she knew that I was there for her. All right. So you've got to have a come to Jesus meeting with the people who you love. And this is what I say. This is what my circle says. Not on my watch. Not on my watch. It takes a village. So on my watch, we're going to all hold each other accountable. Okay. That's why you can't have 20 people, because that's a lot. Okay. So you got to be clear about your circle. So we ask, what are you doing to intentionally self-care? Who in your life has uninhibited access? If you put up your guard, who's going to say, boo, I'm not having that. Here's one last thing about that. And then I'll go to the third question. You got to be real with you. If you are drowning, you can't save someone else that's drowning. There was a season in my life that I literally was drowning, and I just wasn't able to be what I normally could be to the people in my circle. But I let them know that. I said, hey, y'all, I'm drowning. So I can't do what I normally would do. And I was transparent enough to say that. And so if you are drowning, you're not in a position to save anybody else. That's for somebody. I need you to really hear that. But you got to communicate to the people in your world to let them know where you are. All right. All right. So remember, I'm giving you 3 questions. If life is catching up with you, if you keep putting things on the shelf, and that shelf is falling over by now because there's no more room on that shelf. Y'all, let me put a caveat here. I saw a meme the other day, and it had a curse word in it. So I'm going to skip over the curse word. But I saw a meme the other day that said, black women need some time to cry, but they got too much going on. They had too much stuff going on. And I saw that, and I was almost about to repost it. Then I said, no, that's giving into the idea that we are supposed to just suck it up and not deal with what we're dealing with. And that is not the truth. All right, let me keep going. Here is the third question. If life is catching up with you, I ask you, what are you doing to intentionally self-care? Who in your life has uninhibited access to you, who can push past your guards? Here's the third one. What are you doing to hold on to what anchors you? What are you doing to hold on to what anchors you? Listen, y'all, I'm a church girl, okay? You know, they tell me that I'm a first lady of a church. That's what they tell me. So I can only give you the anchor that I know that works for me. And let me give you your key takeaway for this one. The Bible says, if you draw near to God, he draws near to you. But in our darkest times, y'all, that's when it seems like God is distant. That's when it seems like he is silent. But I am here to tell you that he is right there. He will meet you in the valley. He will be right where you need him to be. He has not deserted you, I promise. He will keep your mind in perfect peace if you keep your mind stayed on him. But what often happens is when we get in those dark places, the darkness starts to become so big, the situation begins to block our view from God. And what I'm telling you is to do whatever you got to do to move that out of your way so that you can see that God is right there. If you draw near to him, he will draw near to you. But remember, I'm telling you practical ways to do it. So I'm going to share with you right now practical ways to set aside time to draw near if God happens to be your anchor as well. Okay? If that's not your anchor, inbox me and I'll try to help you sort through, figure out what it is for you. I'm just telling you what works for me. Okay? Let me give you some specific. I'm going to give you about five things that have worked for me. My 5 powerful P's. Okay? That's what I'm going to call it. My 5 powerful P's. Number 1. Recorded prayers have really been vital for me. I'm being really transparent with you guys here, but there are seasons in my life when I don't even have the strength to muster up the prayer that I need for myself. So what I'll do is, because I can write, so I'll write out a prayer using scripture because God answers to his word. So I will write out a prayer using scripture. I will record that prayer into my phone, and then I will just listen to myself praying that prayer out loud. I can't muster up the strength to pray what I need to pray, but I'll hear myself praying that. So recorded prayers have worked for me. Number 2, I protect myself by guarding what I'm listening to. During certain seasons, you got to be careful what you're taking in. So I often go to sleep listening to sermons. Not everybody's sermons. I'll move on from that. Not everybody's sermons, but I'll listen to certain sermons that I know are rooted in the truth of the word. And I promise you guys, I'll wake up and I'll turn over, just turning over, just getting comfortable in the bed. And right at that moment, I'm hearing the preacher say the very thing I needed to hear. And then I'll fall back to sleep. I'm telling you, something happens when something is being spoken to your spirit. Your spirit man hears it. Even if cognitively you can't grasp it, the spirit is grasping it. So these are my 5 powerful P's. Recorded prayers. I protect myself in what I'm listening to. I'll choose a playlist. I'll listen to certain worship songs that are not magnifying my drama, but worship songs that are magnifying God. That's getting my mind off of the bigness of my issue, but on the bigness of my God. And I'll have a specific playlist. I wish I could show it to you right now. I have a specific playlist that I listen to during my quiet time. So recorded prayers, I protect what I'm listening to. I have a certain prayer list. Here's the 4th one. I have a prayer circle. Y'all gonna say she always going through, but when I had a particular tough time, I had a group of 12 women, and I chose 12 intentionally because my foundation was really shaky. And there were 12 women who I would send a text message out and say, here, this is what's going on right now. Please cover this. This is what's going on right now. It was a particularly tough time, and so we need some concentrated prayers. And those women were standing in the gap, and I literally would feel my spirit being lifted. I wasn't praying a thing, but my sisters were praying, and there were specific 12 women. Here's the last one. The last P. You got to protect yourself from certain people. Now, y'all, I'm not one of those people who like to say you need to cut folks off. I think that's foolish because somebody needs to cut you off. So be careful about that. But there are certain people that you can't listen to, that you can't engage with because they may bring up things that you don't need to focus on right now. They may distract you. There are certain people in my life that I know that if I'm having a really, really tough time, I can't necessarily talk to them because they're going to help me get even more worked up. And so sometimes you got to protect yourself and how you're engaging with people, and you got to be discerning enough to know that. It doesn't mean that those people don't love you and they don't care about you, but you just got to know that sometimes, like I remember a few years ago, I didn't mean to laugh about this, but when I tell you, you'll understand why I'm laughing. I had a good girlfriend many years, like 10 years ago, who called me and told me that her father had passed away, and I loved him so much. And when she called me, she had to comfort me. Because I'm like, oh, Jesus, Lord, what are we going to do? That was ridiculous. It was her daddy. And she's having to comfort me. So you got to be careful. You got to make sure. Doesn't mean that people don't love you, but that might not be what you need in that season. All right? So y'all, we're done. I want to share just a little bit more with you. Number one, if life is catching up with you, if you're realizing that, wait a minute, things are getting to be too much, there are 3 things that you can do. Number one, what are you doing to intentionally self-care? Number 2, who has access to your life to see past and push past your guards? And what are you doing to hold on to what truly anchors you? Now, let me just say this really quick, particularly when it comes to depression and anxiety, because those things are really real. Let me tell you, your best friend may be depressed. Your sister may be depressed. Your cousin, your wife, your husband. The people you engage with every day could be dealing with debilitating depression. There are times in my life, there was a time in my life that nobody in my life knew how dark it was. So the people that you are engaging with, they very well could be depressed. And so you got to be careful about how you are engaged. Casual phrases can set somebody off. If you hear somebody saying, if you're in a tough place and somebody says, girl, you're better than me, because see, I wouldn't deal with it. What I would do, that doesn't help, right? In our community, in the African American community, we say things like, girl, he gets a crazy check. Nobody wants to seek help if they're going to be referred to because they get support. You see what I'm saying? We got to be careful about what we say. We say things like, if you haven't accomplished this by this time, is something wrong with you? Well, everybody has a different journey. When we minimize what people are dealing with, ain't nothing wrong with you. Or if we say things like, you're too strong for that. Those kind of comments are things that I've been guilty of saying some of those things, but those kind of things keep people from seeking help, right? Make sure that you're not aggressive. If somebody in your life is dealing with depression, don't be aggressive, but be consistent, okay? And then here's the last one. I want you to log off of social media. If life is really tough, social media is not the place for you to be. I'm not encouraging you to isolate. Connect with somebody. You know how we used to just call people? Connect with people in that way. And lastly, I'm done. I want you to be willing to seek support. Now, I know I'm a therapist and a life coach, but I think everybody needs a therapist and a life coach. I personally believe it, because you cannot sort through all the stuff that goes on in your mind by yourself. You cannot. And if you're trying to sort through all of that by yourself, you have a very limited perspective. You don't know how you are showing up in the world. And when you seek help from a qualified professional, they can kind of help ask you the questions that I'm asking you today. They can kind of ask you, okay, now I know you're telling me that John did you wrong. Has anybody else done you wrong in your life? Then you list, well, John and Keisha and Stacy, and you start listing all these people. And after a while, as a therapist, I'm going to say, hey, well, you're the common denominator. So tell me how you're kind of showing up in that. So that's why it's so important to have somebody who can help you sort through the things that are going on with you. But anyway, guys, that's it. If life is catching up with you, those are the 3 questions I want you to ask yourself. I want you to comment in the comment section. I'm going to be there engaging with you guys. I hope this blessed you. And until next time, I'm Robin. Take care.